Hi and welcome to the Gemhawks YouTube channel. I hope you're having a beautiful day today. For the free wire tutorial today, we're going to make beaded triple drop earrings with scrap lengths of wire and just 6 beads. I'm wearing them now, but why don't I pop you down to the board, you can take a closer look and make along with me today. So here we have our beaded triple drop earrings using just a couple of short scrap lengths of 1mm or 18 gauge wire and 6 beads in total. I'm working with some 8mm rounds in faceted black agate, but you can change that up to your heart's content. So let's start with the very easiest part of the project, which is to make this little spiral drop charm. This is a design that I use over and over again, everywhere frankly. So I have a 1.5 inch length of that 1mm or 18 gauge wire, and I'm going to start near the end of my round nose pliers at the end of that wire to rotate around to create almost a circular form. And then I'm going to push that into my non-dominant hand to create a double spiral. Now the key with spirals is to move slowly and steadily, and your spirals will end up flat and rounded. So we have gone once and twice from that starting position. I'm just going to flip hands, grip across that wire with my chain nose pliers and pull that away at a right angle. It looks a little bit like a lollipop at this stage. I'm going to give that a really hearty squish, both on that circular spiral form and just above that angle change. We want that to be nice and strong. Let's add in one of those beads to make the lowest part of our triple drop beaded earrings. So I have now a spiral, and what I'm going to do is to just bring the wire that sticks out above away forwards from the design. I'm just going to protect my bead with my thumbnail, and that's moving away at 90 degrees to the spiral. I'm then going to use the smallest loop on my bail makers to create a rounded form, and this will be a simple open and closable loop. So I'm going to rotate that around. It might move slightly off centre, in which case just take it back to where it should be and trim away any excess. There really shouldn't be a huge amount to play with, just enough to make that nice and neat and tidy. I'm just trimming away a couple of mil there. And then we'll close that loop back up, and you've created the first part of your beaded triple drop earrings. So I have one that I made earlier in true Blue Peter fashion, and what you might notice is that those spirals move in 2 opposite directions. One is moving counterclockwise or anti-clockwise, and one is moving clockwise. I just like that as an attention to detail. If you don't manage to do that, it really doesn't matter one bit. Let's just pop those up to one side. So the beads I've chosen to work with are black agate in 8mm faceted rounds, and you only need 6 of them. So let's just pop those down for a second before we move on to the next step. So with a design like the beaded triple drop earring, you can take as little or as much inspiration as you desire from a tutorial like this. You can miss out bits. You don't have to have the bottom one. You don't have to have an extended large drop at the top. You can make it completely unique to you. All of the little individual techniques are all transferable. So let's get down to the next step. For the next step in today's tutorial, I'm going to be using 1mm or 18 gauge wire again, another scrap length of around about 2 inches. I'm also going to be using a round form which is just larger than my bead. So my beads are 8mm, this is a 9.5mm, so we'll slightly pinch that up once we've created the round form. There's Joey again. We're going to begin by using the smallest pin on my bail making pliers. You could use your standard round nose pliers if you prefer. I'm going to extra warm the middle of that piece of wire. As it's a scrap, it's a little bit tense. It's seen some things. I'm going to use the smallest pin. So let's create a loop by folding that wire around and centralising the loop as we go. So if I pop those pliers back into position, that's pretty much centralised now. Just going to fold those wires over in opposite directions, making sure that they sit side by side at the top of that loop. Once I'm happy that that's a good true shape, I'm just going to give it a very tiny little nip with my flat pliers to make sure that it sits in position. I'm then going to use my round form, and you could use a pencil or a pen, to create a little horseshoe shape off the top of that small loop. So just to get it started, you might need to hold that in position, or it might kind of wriggle around in your fingers. So we're making a little bit of a stirrup shape or a horseshoe shape with that loop on the end, and we will need to tighten that up slightly because my round form is just a little bit larger than I need. So to do that, I'm simply going to pinch that very, very gently until it looks about right, frankly. Now, when you're making pairs of earrings, it does pay to do both sides of the earring at the same time. I'm going to grab my flat pliers now, and I'm going to grip across that little U shape or horseshoe shape, trying to get that as even as possible before I push both of those wires away from me. So I've got some right angle bends, give or take, moving away. Now you can use your round nose pliers, but I am again going to use the smallest pin on my bail makers. I'm going to rotate that around because I want another 2 simple loops just on the end here where we created that angle change. So there's one, and then exactly the same on the other side. Now you may like to start further away, roll that around until it finishes in position at the top of that angle change. You're much less likely to poke the end of your thumb. Let's then grab those flush cutters and trim away the excess at that angle change. Look twice and then cut once. Doesn't matter if it's the tiny bit away because we're going to just move that around gently to make it sit where we want it to. Well, the reason I put that tail of wire on my finger is to stop it from going off into space. Whoops, like that just did. So what we now need to do is make sure that those 2 little loops we've created are good and strong. Give them some squishes once you've closed up those loops. So on the second side, I'll try and get that over my thumbnail so you can see that better. Draw that into position so the cut end meets the angle change, and so that both of those loops sit up at the top of that little stirrup shape. Or a horseshoe, can't decide what it is. It's a little bit of a U shape. So the key thing here is to make your second piece before you start assembling the earring so that you can ensure that they are both the same. So just take your time. You may need to spend a few moments just getting those loops to be exactly the same height up from the lowest central loop on that little... I'm going to change it to be a snaffle now. It could be almost anything. Horseshoe, stirrup, snaffle. It's very, very horsey today. So just try your hardest to get those 2 as close as possible to being similar. At the end of the day, if they're a little bit different, they're on opposite sides of your head. Don't worry too much. Let's head down to the board and make that last section. Bring it all together. For the uppermost section of our beaded triple drop earrings, we're going to use a 6-inch length of that 1mm or 18 gauge wire. Now I have a round form which is around about 15.8, 16mm or so, like a chunky marker pen, and I'm just going to use that to create a rounded form in the centre of the wire. Now we actually don't want it to be quite that tight to begin with because some beads will struggle to go on to that point. So we're just going to make a nice smooth arc down at the bottom and then open it out slightly. So we're going to grab one of those stirrups and thread through our long piece of wire into one side of the stirrup, add on one of our little beads, and then thread through the second side of that stirrup. So let's just push that down now into position. What we will then do is use the memory of our wire to just very, very softly and slowly close that up to pinch into position. We're then going to use that wire to create a nice teardrop shape. Slightly larger than that, I think, like so. And again, I would say make your earrings side by side so you can get the curve the same and the height to the crossover point the same. That's really important to making those earrings have the same length drop. I might just open that out slightly and then draw the wire over a little bit more like so. So I've made a little pear shape now. One of my wires at that crossover point will go to the side over to the 9 o'clock or to the 3 o'clock position, and the other wire is going to come upright. So if I pop that down on the board, you can see what we are doing. We're creating a pear drop with a bead and that little horseshoe hanging off the bottom. What we're going to do now is grab at the piece of wire where the angle change occurs, the one that goes sideways. And I'm going to grip across that angle change. I'll just show you with that wire moving around. It's just in front of that other angle change. Push that all the way around the back, and then you will have this lovely pear drop shape, which we will then grip across carefully. And what we're doing here is securing the shape of our teardrop. Bring that remaining tail of wire all the way over the front. What we can now do is add on another one of our 8mm round faceted black agate beads. Give that wire a quick smooth through. I'm going to protect the top of my bead and draw the tail of wire above the bead over to one side. And I'm then going to use either round nose pliers or bail making pliers to generate a simple loop up at the top. If you feel that you would rather have a secure wrapped loop, give yourself a 2mm gap up at the top here above that bead and allow yourself space to create a wrapped loop. I'm going to draw that over the surface of the wire just like so. Give that a bit of a squish to keep it into position, and then I'm going to trim that away. There's not a huge amount of weight in these earrings, so I'm not overly worried about using a simple loop today. However, you do have the option to leave a 2mm gap above the bead and use that tail to go around a couple of times to create a nice secure wrapped loop. What we're going to do with the tail of wire that's sticking out to one side is get both of your pairs of earrings to this stage and then ensure that both of those lengths of wire are exactly the same. So I've got to the same stage with my second earring now, and the easiest way to ensure that these are both the same length is to add them side by side over the top, like so. Ensure that your beads are side by side, grip them very firmly, bring those two wires together, and then you can ensure that you trim those to the exact same length. It should be at least an inch of wire remaining. If it's slightly less, as long as they're both the same, it doesn't really matter. So what we're going to do now is to add a spiral up at the top here. So at the very, very end of that tail of wire, draw that around until you get the beginning of a circular form. Again, push that into your non-dominant hand to bring that spiral to the centre of your earring design, just beneath that neckline bead. You can see that sticking out at the front there. And then you can either use your fingers or your pliers just to sit that down flat over the surface. So you would repeat on the second earring, which I will do in a moment, and then you can pick your choice of spiral drop charm, open that simple loop up and add it into the bottom of that design. Close it up again as if you were opening and closing a jump ring, and then you can add in your preferred ear wire. So I have made my loops up at the top here to be the same orientation as the main earring because my earring loops are opposite, so they will mesh really nicely together. So let's just open up that simple earring finding and slide it on with the spiral facing forwards. Close that loop up and you are done. You'll just need to repeat the spiral and putting everything together. I hope you've enjoyed making my beaded triple drop earrings with me today. My name is Jem. This is the Gemhawks YouTube channel. Every week we upload a new tutorial featuring primarily wire to create jewellery or artwork for yourself. I hope that you're enjoying the content. Do consider subscribing to the channel if you are. Leave me a comment if there's something that you'd like to see, and don't forget to like the video. Share away, my friends, and I'll see you very soon. Bye for now.